I guess you will find out. We have some stuff to talk about. Apparently, Massachusetts ain't doing so great because there was a incident, let's just say, that happened recently, and we gotta talk about that. So, is a conversation about Nazis. That's basically what it was. Let's go ahead and get into how that conversation looked. But first, let's get into the fan art section. We have one piece of fan art here that is from, if I can move the 3D printer cam here, whoop. We have one piece of fan art that is from Ivana Dragmeyer. This is uncomfy Suris, apparently. I am uncomfortable looking at this, so I guess it works. It is uncomfy Suris, and it makes me uncomfy to stare at. So, you know what? I get it. But no, it's not you. It's not. Sorry. So, here's what's happening. I lost my place. It's from Kitterdoodle. I lost my place in the fan art section, and my brain was trying to go, who did it? Who did it? It's Kitterdoodle, not Ivana Dragmeyer. It's not Ivana, it's Kitterdoodle. Sorry. It's anti-Suris. Inverse Suris. The onesie is outside and he endeavors to make everybody uncomfy. Right, it's not Ivana Dragmeyer. That is what so when I'm doing fan art, I have to pull up the actual area that it was, but because Stoff sent me a message, I looked at the message, and for some reason, Discord doesn't keep your place in any channel you're in when you leave an area on Discord. So I was like, oh, shit, I have to go figure out where this is. Quick, filler noise, filler noise. Jesus Christ. Inverse Suris would have remembered the name. Inverse Suris is uncomfortable. Anyway, thank you for your fan art submission. Let's talk about this incident that happened recently. So this is the clip that's going viral right now. And I'm going to go ahead and raise the volume on this a little bit. Ivana, thank you very much for the 200 bits. I'm not behind this car shit. No, you're right. It's Kitterdoodle. Sorry, it's Kitterdoodle. I fooked up. But I need to increase the volume here because we're going to go on a journey, people.
Let's talk about the Nazis. I would like to know, although I'm not posing a...
So, this is a Republican representative in Massachusetts, I believe. Let's go.
Question through the chair. I would like to know what they did that was illegal. I would like to know what they did, in detail if folks would like to share, that was wrong, that infringed on another person's right. Holding a rally, and even holding a rally with guns, is not illegal. Let's talk about the Nazis.
So, I had a suspicion when I looked at this tweet that there might be some problems with the mentality here. But I wanted to go ahead and give benefit of the doubt here, because my thought process is there is no way that this person is talking about the original Nazis, which even that is a weird one to think about because the American brown shirts and American civil history is actually where the Nazis got a lot of their ideas on how to treat the Jews from. But that's besides the point. So I wanted to figure out where this specimen's mentality was coming from. And I figured it out. So, continue without disabling. No thanks. So she's not actually talking about the Nazis as they existed in Nazi Germany. She's talking about the LARPer dipshits that wish they were Nazis. Well, they are Nazis. They're just modern and don't have the same political backing, and they have to euphemize a lot of their speech, and they probably trade underwear with one another. Sirs, I'm sorry, where's Indiana Jones punching these Nazis? It is completely viable to punch Nazis, and here's an example of why. So apparently there were neo-Nazis who gathered near the State House in Augusta. This, I believe, is what she's referring to. So 25 of them held a demonstration at the Capitol, and Augusta police were made aware of the situation. There was no actual damage to property at this point. And then House Speaker Rachel Tabat responded to it saying, I can't say strongly enough, there needs to be zero tolerance for white nationalist groups' behavior or intimidation. The events that transpired yesterday are an ongoing escalation by a group that is seemingly emboldened, and we must call out their abhorrent beliefs and actions. As Speaker of the House, I will be relentless in driving a campaign against this racist behavior that has no place in Maine. Maine, not Massachusetts. Sorry. So, the very first bit of response to this, because the clipping of this makes it seem like she's talking about the Nazis as in the Nazis in Germany. If I'm correct, she's talking about a neo-Nazi group in America, which is a little bit different, but still concerning. You see, if she's talking about the Nazis, the German Nazis from the 40s, then it's very, very concerning because, holy shit, why are you holding office? If she's talking about the neo-Nazis, then it's disturbing for a different reason. Because what we should be asking ourselves is not, should anybody be able to say anything they want for any reason? This is America. You already can. Your free speech is protected. That is a thing that you have for being in America. What we need to ask ourselves is, why do these people want to say those things specifically? So there's this smoke and mirrors thing that happens with Nazis, and in this case, I feel perfectly validated in calling them Nazis, because that's what they are. They call themselves that. They are perfectly fine taking on the label of Nazis. They always move the conversation into, but I should be allowed to say it. And we always fall for the bait on definitions of free speech and shit like that, instead of having the conversation that really does need to happen in those situations, which is, what are they trying to communicate, and why? Why do you want to communicate Nazi ideology? Why is an argument for the annihilation of Jews, for the eugenics, for the camps, for the lock and goose step procedures, night of long knife ship? Why is that the thing that we don't talk about? Because, and correct me if I'm wrong, how many of you in chat have had a conversation with somebody who's either a Nazi or is close enough to the ideology that you'd be willing to assign the label, or just somebody who's an extremist, and they always bait you into the conversation about whether or not they should be allowed to say the thing they're saying? Which, if you live in America, you might start having conversations about free speech, you might start having conversations about what is incitement, what is hate speech, and all of that is a trap. All of that is a fucking trap. It is a trap to move away from the actual conversation that they are having. Because the conversation they're having is, again, one about eugenics, one about annihilation of people, one about totalitarian fascistic control, or at least that those things are good, one about racial supremacy. We tend to not confront them on those things because they tend to be very good at moving us away from that conversation and into the conversation about whether they should be allowed to say the things. Stop having the conversation about whether they should be allowed to say the things, because when you have only that conversation, this is the response you get from your this is the response you will get from your legislature.
Let's talk about the Nazis. I would like to know, although I'm not posing a question through the chair, I would like to know what they did that was illegal. I would like to know what they did, in detail if folks would like to share, that was wrong, that infringed on another person's right.
So, this is the end result of them trying to argue the free speech angle only. Because when they argue the free speech angle only, you'll end up flubbing on whose rights were infringed. Because we can talk about the esoteric conversation about how if racism is allowed in an area, then people who the racism is targeted to will tend to not speak as much, and then it will cause people who are already racist to be emboldened because the races who are being talked about are not advocating back for themselves. We can have that conversation. We can have the conversation about the paradox of tolerance. But realistically, what's happening here is they've successfully moved the conversation so far away from their own rhetoric that we end up talking about whether they're allowed to have that opinion. No, duh, you're allowed to have a wrong opinion. No, duh, you're allowed to say wrong things. The question you need to press on these kinds of people is not whether or not they should be allowed it. The question you need to press on them is, what do they want? What is their ideal end goal? What is their ideal end goal? If somebody is truly racist, their ideal end goal is usually going to be segregation or persecution in some way, shape, and form of the race they do not like. Not truly racist, but if somebody is like racial supremacist, specifically. You can be truly racist on minute issues. So you need to ask that person, what happens? What happens when your worldview is carried out to the nines? What happens when your worldview is allowed to perpetuate? Would you be okay if your child were to marry a Jewish person or a black person? When you start pressing them on those things, and you start exposing their bigotries on that end, you end up doing more to move the conversation away from whether or not they're allowed to have the opinion. And the reason I say this is there is a reason why right-wing extremists on the internet have the saying, you just call anybody you disagree with a Nazi. If you're going to call somebody a Nazi, press them on the beliefs that they have and expose them as a Nazi. Expose them as somebody that has those beliefs. Expose them as an extremist. When you expose them as that, you can challenge them on those individual things. If you just try to have the easy and broad conversation of whether or not they should be allowed to say the things, at least in America, you're always going to lose that conversation. Because even people who agree that everything they say is abhorrent are going to come to the defense that they should be allowed to say the thing that they're saying. Even though everything they're saying is wrong. Even though everything they're saying has a negative effect on the world. Expose somebody as the bigot they are, and then tackle the individual bigotries, debunk the individual bigotries. Trying to have the broad and easy conversation is harder than having the individualized conversations on the individual beliefs, and showing why the individual beliefs are wrong. Why are eugenics wrong? Because human beings are not tools for the purpose of creating a specialized race of people for doing certain things. Even if that thing is, quote, general improvement of the species. Why is anti-Semitism wrong? Because like any bigotry based on a belief structure, somebody's religious belief does not paint the entirety of who that person is. Why is it wrong to have racial supremacy? Because we constructed the idea of a race to begin with. So trying to argue that one is supreme over another is literally towing the line of made-up bullshit we made up long ago and still can't accurately define today, because there's more genetic difference within a handful of people in one race than there are between you and another supposed race. People are allowed to say whatever they like, and question or not is whether or not they get to keep their teeth afterwards. Right. So here's the other benefit. So when you take somebody like a Richard Spencer and you expose them for who they are, the likelihood of them losing their teeth afterward actually goes up. Nikki Tanakh says, that's one thing I don't understand. If a particular speech causes demonstrable harm, then why should it be allowed? So I personally believe that if a type of speech causes demonstrable harm, it should not be allowed. However, I believe having that conversation with individual racists is a trap. Because in the current legal structure of America, they always have a legal backing on that argument. They always have a legal win on that argument. Well, I should be allowed to say that. This is America. This is the land of freedom of speech. Blah, 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 blah. So instead, I prefer to have the conversation about how they're wrong. A lot of people like to hide behind the fact that something is just an opinion of theirs, or it has no bearing on society or on the world around them. But nobody speaks things into the aether for no reason. When you say something, it is for a purpose. Whether it is to be heard or whether it is just to have noise come out, you still have to ask yourself, why that noise? Why does somebody need to hear that message? So while I agree that person should not be allowed to say certain things, we should frown upon that greatly, whether it be legally or there be such social ramifications that that person loses all ability of being employed. That is irrespective of the conversation I think we need to be having. Because unfortunately, here in the States, that conversation is an automatic lose. Instead, grab the person and go, hey, what do you think about X, Y, and Z? Here's the reasons why those things are wrong. Deconstruct their beliefs. Don't let somebody just have a, quote, opinion. If the opinion is wrong, and if that wrong opinion is harmful, then dismantle it. I think that's more important than just outright banning it. Because one of those we can effectively do, and the other one we can't. Ask yourself this: what is the actual roadmap? What is the roadmap to banning that kind of speech in America? And you'll find that that roadmap doesn't really exist, not in any effective way. But what's the roadmap to taking an individual bigot and moving them away from bigotry? Ask yourself this: if you had those beliefs before, what moved you out of it? We know that demonstrable harm is lowered when that speech is curtailed, but we aren't living in a world where we have that particular option. So let's work with the tools we do have. Let's make effective use of what we do have access to. What makes somebody change their opinions from bigoted ones to none? I'd like to believe that in a lot of situations, people hold bigoted opinions because they are ignorant. Exposure to people around them, exposure to different beliefs, exposure to different ideologies, exposure to differences in humanity tends to have a positive effect on bigots. Positive in that they tend to change. You can't stamp it out entirely. I wish we could. But you can change enough of it that the handful of bigots that have voices don't get to have large voices anymore. So Trump's response to COVID turned me from a Trump voter to a leftist. Sometimes it is a failure of leadership that changes your opinion. Sometimes it is recognizing that you are looking for confirmation bias in all the wrong ways. Sometimes it's recognizing that your beliefs are the beliefs you want to have, and you are spending more time reinforcing them than you are challenging them. But when I look at this particular video, this is the result, in my opinion, of a successful attempt from neo-Nazis in America to perpetually move the conversation of their bigotry away from the mechanics of their bigotry and towards the conversation of freedom of speech. That's my opinion anyway. If you have a differing opinion, that's what the comment section is for. But I feel like a failure to address why particular bigotries are incorrect often leads people to stay bigoted, because I am convinced that oftentimes bigotry is a result of ignorance. Now, if we're talking about the Ben Shapiros and the Nick Fuenteses and the Matt Walshes of the world, then no, their bigotry is not a result of ignorance. Their bigotry is a result of money. They have a financial incentive to maintain their bigotries. You'll never win against those people, because a win against them, for most people, would be changing their beliefs. You're not going to change their beliefs when their entire ideology is their money-making machine. You can, however, change the opinion of an individual who believes one of those people. If you're going to talk to a Walsh or a Shapiro or any of them, you do it in public and in a way where you can humiliate them. That's how you get the win against them. Whether that is doing a response video to them exposing their idiocy, or whether that is going to one of their campus hunting rallies where they try to find teenagers to argue with. That is how you do your win against them. But you do your win against individuals in private, when you sit down and have a conversation with them about the why. You'll never convince a Ben Shapiro about the why in private, and you will never convince a bigot about the why in public. In public, the bigot is going to hold on to their belief for as long as humanly possible, because it makes them feel strong. It makes them feel right. It makes them feel smart. But when you do it in private, when you get them where there's nobody else watching them, it can be a lot harder for them to maintain that. At least, that's what I have found in my experience. A lot of change tends to happen internally. A lot of questioning tends to happen internally. And a lot of reinforcement tends to happen externally. So when a bigot is in a crowd of other bigots emboldening them, when you try to convince them within the crowd of bigots, the likelihood of success is very, very low. Take them away from the crowd, take them away from that bastion of reinforcement, you'll have better luck. But let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. I saw this video, and I didn't want to do a response to just it. I felt I needed to dig into the why this video even happened in the first place, and there's a lot more conversation to be had than just the woman endorsed Nazis, it's bad. That did, in fact, happen, but there's more to it than that. Hit the like button if you haven't already, subscribe if you haven't already, and as always, everyone, insert end of video tagline here.
Hey, I just quickly want to give a thank you to all of my wonderful patrons who keep this show running. YouTube and Twitch are a pretty bumpy ride at the best of times, and the stability a Patreon provides me is worth more than I can say here. I'd also like to thank each and every one of my $20 and up patrons here, and they would be Red Joker, Blitzkrieg, Cameron, Dren, Jemshin, Smiling DM, Poundini, Mabbity Babbity, Naomi, Isaac, Nixie Chan, the Oberon team, Agamotto, Jordan, Ravi, Giuni, Kiratorian, Prisma, all of you, I'm not saying that part, and Starlight. And finally, thank you to everyone else that helps keep this channel alive. While you're here, why not check out another video? And thank you for watching.